Chapter 328. The Emperor, 1. Isn't this going too far? Eugene demanded as he pointedly crossed his legs and slumped backward in his seat. His behavior might be seen as incredibly rude, but by this point, Eugene no longer cared about that in the slightest. He had been summoned by the Emperor. He hadn't made his excuses, and he had come when he was called. Sienna hadn't accompanied him as the Emperor had summoned Eugene alone. Sienna had been upset about not being included, but she had decided to acquiesce for now and had returned to the mansion ahead of him. After first seeing Sienna off like that, Eugene had gotten into a carriage with the knights from the White Dragon Knights. But from then on, things slowly started to become more and more obnoxious. What was so bad about riding in a carriage, you ask? It was at least better than walking, but the problem was that it wasn't just any simple carriage. The windows were specially tinted so that Eugene couldn't clearly see what was happening outside. When they were rolling down the city streets, he could still at least vaguely see through the window. But from the moment they entered the palace grounds, Eugene could not see what was going on outside and couldn't hear anything either. If he really thought about it, Eugene could understand why it needed to be this way. This was the Imperial Palace, the place where His Majesty, the highest-ranking person in this great nation, resided. As such, it would make sense for this place to pay close attention to security and try its best to keep things secret. However, Eugene still thought they were excessive with all this security and surveillance. What had happened when he got off the carriage was particularly eye-popping. The knights waiting for him outside the carriage had handed him a blindfold with exceedingly polite manners. By that point, Eugene was so fed up that he had just let out an annoyed snort. Wanting to know just how far they intended to go with this, he obediently put on the blindfold. Naturally, this wasn't just any simple and ordinary blindfold. It was an artifact enchanted with high-level spells. It didn't just block sight. It also blocked his hearing, smell, and other senses, even making him lose his sense of direction. Even so, with Eugene's skill in magic, it was possible for him to somewhat resist and mitigate its effects, but Eugene didn't feel the need to do so right away. If he did, it was certain that the knights of the royal guard would notice the movement of his eyes and start quibbling with him. Although Eugene felt like they probably wouldn't go that far, they might accuse him of disrespecting the emperor or even up the charges to treason if he were caught doing so. So wearing the blindfold and allowing himself to be led along by the knights, the room that Eugene eventually arrived at wasn't the center of some magnificent grand hall, as he had imagined before getting into the carriage, nor was he shown to a dining table full of fancy delicacies. It wasn't even a simple parlor. It was a not-too-small, solitary room. In a tone that made it unclear whether it was an order or a request, the knights told him to sit on the chair stuck to the wall. Eugene complied with a dangerous smile. "Have I committed some kind of crime?" Eugene asked politely. Up until this point, Eugene had never once argued with their instructions. He hadn't even asked any questions. After being forced to sit in this chair for about 30 minutes, Eugene had still patiently sat down with his mouth shut until now. But this was it. Eugene thought that he had managed to endure quite a lot. After all, hadn't he sat there in silence for the past 30 minutes? While impatiently shaking his right foot, which was draped across his left thigh, Eugene glared straight across the room. Standing there were two knights with familiar-looking faces. They were members of the White Dragon Knights, a royal knightly order who served the emperor. Carrion Dark, captain of the 1st Division, and Derry Dark, captain of the 2nd Division. "I'm not sure what you mean by that," Carrion responded calmly. The two knights might be twins, but they were probably fraternal, as they certainly didn't resemble each other. Moreover, it was easy to tell who the younger brother was because Derry's skin was darkened, as if he had a tan. However, from today onwards, Eugene decided he would no longer associate the name Derry Dark with things like being a twin, someone's younger brother, or his tan skin, but something else. "Should I start by plucking out one of your eyes?" Eugene suddenly said out loud. Derry had been glaring fiercely at Eugene with a heavy focus, lost control of his expression, and was left staring blankly at Eugene for a few moments. This was because, for those few moments, Derry was unable to process what this brat had just said. It couldn't be helped. Today was only the second time that Eugene and Derry had ever met, and today was also the first time they had spoken to each other personally. This was the most secluded and hidden location in all of the Imperial Palace, and Derry was one of the few knights who held unquestionable authority over anything that happened in this room. Putting all that aside, Derry was still twice as old as Eugene. So Derry could only respond by saying, "What did you say just now?" Was it possible that Eugene had unconsciously spat out one of the thoughts running through his head? There were certainly times when things like that happened, but at least in this case, Eugene hadn't committed that sort of mistake. Eugene had confidently uttered those words while fully meaning to do so. After having to endure all of these annoyances, to then be glared at by this petty and mediocre bastard, who insisted on acting as if he was someone who deserved to be respected, Eugene was sick of it. "I said that I'm going to pluck out one of your eyes," Eugene repeated. What Eugene truly desired was to unleash a flood of curses at the Emperor, but he still had enough self-control to avoid doing so. He now understood why Sienna hadn't been invited along as well. This was an obvious and blatant attempt at suppression. But even if Strahd was the emperor of a great empire, he still wouldn't dare to suppress the wise Sienna. If he had shown even the slightest sign of what he intended to do, Sienna would have already acted first by turning the imperial palace on its head. Then what about Eugene? There was actually nothing that he could really do about this. Setting Eugene's reputation aside, the Lionheart clan he belonged to had owed their allegiance to the empire for hundreds of years. If it wasn't for that, I would just... Eugene was holding back his desire to spit foul curses at the emperor solely to avoid harming his clan. However, as for those two bastards just standing there glaring at him all bug-eyed, it wasn't like they were the emperor or members of the imperial family, were they? Derry was taken aback. "What did you say?" "It seems like this bastard's ears don't work properly," Eugene spat out, abandoning all pretexts of politeness. Holding out a finger in front of him, Eugene crooked it invitingly towards Derry. "If you're mad, why don't you come here and have a go?" Eugene challenged. "The Emperor isn't here yet, and this room seems spacious enough, so it should be fine for us to have a duel." Derry roared. "You knave." Eugene retorted, "Lower the volume, you bastard. Don't you know that you're being disrespectful to the Imperial Palace, the residence of His Majesty? It's not like you twins are children, so how dare you throw a tantrum just because you're a little bit upset?" Derry's face flushed red at these provocations. Panting angrily, he pulled out a handkerchief from his pocket. Just as Derry was about to throw the handkerchief without second thoughts, Carrion intervened. "Stop," Carrion ordered. "Don't get in the way." Derry shouted back. Carrion reminded him, "Are you sure that you can win?" Carrion was actually just as enraged as Derry was. From the start, these twins had already been wary and hostile toward Eugene. It was all because of their pride as Knights of the White Dragon. Whenever people used to talk about who the best knights in the Kiel Empire were, the groups always mentioned were the White Dragon Knights and the Lionheart clan's White Lion Knights and Black Lion Knights. However, that had now become a story of the past. During the match that took place 1 year ago, the White Dragon Knights were defeated 7-3 by the Lionheart clan's White Lion Knights. The decisive reason for their defeat was all because of this Eugene Lionheart. As a 20-year-old youth, he defeated 3 members of the White Dragon Knights. Moreover, those defeats had been one-sided and overwhelming. And of the 3 that were defeated, one of them had been Ebolt Magius, the captain of the 4th Division. Following the match, the White Dragon Knights were no longer referred to as one of the best knightly orders in the Empire. In this grand continent, the strongest knights had been confirmed to be the Knights of the Lionheart clan. In other words, the household guard of a single clan had managed to surpass the elite forces of an emperor and his empire. The individual who had caused all of this was one Eugene Lionheart. It was only natural that Carrion and Derry, who had proudly served in the White Dragon Knights for decades, were hostile to Eugene. However, being hostile and wary towards him and being sure that you can win were 2 completely different matters. In Carrion's opinion, if his younger brother Derry agreed to this duel with Eugene, it would definitely result in his brother's defeat within 5 minutes. As a captain, Carrion was confident in his skill, and he also recognized his younger brother's skill, but Eugene Lionheart, a young man currently 21 soon to be 22, was a monster beyond all common sense. Derry was struck silent at Carrion's question. After slowly breathing in and out to calm himself, Derry eventually crumpled up the handkerchief and stuffed it back into his pocket. After confirming that his brother had calmed down, Carrion turned to Eugene and asked, "Are these surroundings causing you much discomfort?" He was asking if Eugene was uncomfortable. Instead of soothing Eugene, Carrion's question just made Eugene more annoyed. "Of course I'm uncomfortable," Eugene replied as he cracked his knuckles. Crack crack. This room had more than a few suspicious corners to it. He had yet to investigate it properly, but from his immediate impressions, it seemed to be located deep underground. The wall behind his back didn't seem to be made out of any ordinary material either. You dragged me, someone who hasn't committed any crimes, down here like a common criminal, Eugene accused. You haven't even given me a proper explanation for this either. If you were truly a suspect, you would have been sent to the dungeons instead of escorted to this room. Also, His Majesty would never dare to offend you like that, Chiron said as he checked his wristwatch. Please don't be too disturbed by His Majesty's delay. Eugene Lionheart, we are aware that you are an exceptional person and someone whose status no one can simply ignore. After all, he was the hero. Carrion continued. However, this is the Keel Empire. You are a citizen of this empire and your clan, the Lionhearts, have owed their allegiance to the empire for the past 300 years. As such, Eugene cut him off. So what? Are you saying that His Majesty, the Emperor, still has the right to treat an innocent citizen like this? Regarding that issue, it's not my place to say anything about it. What I do want to say is, His Majesty's time is precious, Carrion insisted with a faint smile. Also, I hope you recognize what an honor this is. You may have already realized this, but this room holds a special secret. As far as I am aware, the only people who have entered this room to hold a conversation with His Majesty are people that His Majesty wishes to build a true relationship with. A true relationship? Eugene parroted suspiciously. That's right, Carrion confirmed. Even your adoptive father, the patriarch of the Lionheart clan, has never been inside this room. Over the generations, whenever the imperial family harbored concern in their hearts, especially towards a high-ranking noble, they had made use of this room of truth. As far as Carrion was aware, there had never been a case where someone without a title had been led into this room. Though his qualifications are adequate. And he's certainly dangerous enough, Carrion thought silently as he kept his mouth shut. In fact, they didn't have the chance to continue talking. The door to the room opened. The current Emperor of Keel, Strahd II, walked into the room with his fancy cloak billowing behind him. He looked exactly like what an ordinary person would imagine when they thought of the word emperor. Wearing a large crown and a flowing cape, his face held the weight of dignity, and he also carried a staff in one hand. The emperor didn't enter on his own. Right behind him, following the emperor like a shadow, came the knight, Alcester Dragonic, commander of the White Dragon Knights. Alcester showed a flustered expression for a moment when he saw Eugene sitting in this room, but instead of saying anything immediately, he quietly followed the emperor into the room. The moment that the emperor entered, Carrion and Derry immediately dropped down onto one knee and bowed their heads. Eugene still wasn't happy about all of this, but for now he decided to get up from his chair and pay his respects. There's no need for that. Please take your seat, the emperor instantly requested. Eugene Lionheart, I didn't call you here just to get you to kneel down to me. Both Strahd's gaze and voice were cold. As instructed, Eugene sat down while struggling to control the twitching of his cheeks. While staring at Eugene, the emperor lightly tapped his staff on the floor. At this movement, a splendid throne appeared across from Eugene. The emperor sat heavily on the throne and rested his chin in one hand. I have wanted to meet and speak with you for a while now, the emperor began. It is my honor, said Eugene. I am glad that you think so. To be honest, I wish that I could have met you sooner than this, but, well, we were occupied with other matters and it seems you were also busy at the time, the emperor muttered before grinning. In fact, if we really wanted to meet with you, we could have met with you sooner than now. However, we are unsure if you are aware of this, but it's all due to the Lionheart Patriarch. He has kept putting off the appointment while making the excuse that, as his son, you were still too young and lacking in qualifications for an audience with us. Was it 3 years ago? During the Lionheart clan's internal turmoil at the Black Lion Castle. At that time, we not only called upon the Lionheart Patriarch but you as well. Eugene hesitated. Well, at least you've managed to summon me now. I am quite overwhelmed by this honor. He didn't truly feel that way in the slightest, but for now Eugene decided to at least claim that he did. We have long harbored a great interest in you, the emperor admitted as a thin smile hovered on his lips. Eugene Lionheart. There are so many words that could be used to describe you. Even now, there are several that come to our mind. Eugene kept silent. Even as a youth, Your actions have drawn the attention of the whole continent. And ours as well. But you should remember, before you are a Lionheart, you are a citizen of the Empire. The Emperor lectured in a relaxed tone as he raised the staff. At this sight, Alchester's head snapped up as he shouted, "Your Majesty!" "We have yet to finish speaking," the Emperor warned Alchester in a low voice. Then he resumed talking to Eugene once more. "Eugene Lionheart, the reason we have called you here today isn't just to take your measure, or to compliment you. If that's the case, why have you called me here?" Eugene asked. "Because we wish to know what type of person you are," the Emperor replied as he slowly lowered his staff. "What are your thoughts? What have you done and what do you intend to do in the future?" The moment the staff touched the ground, Alchester hastily reached out a hand to grab the Emperor's shoulder. But Carrion and Derry, who had been sticking close to the Emperor, kept Alchester from laying a hand on the imperial personage. In unison, the two drew their swords and blocked Alchester's movements. Whoosh! The walls that lined this room suddenly disappeared. The figures of Alchester, Carrion and Derry, who had been standing behind the Emperor, also disappeared. Within a seemingly endless expanse of space, only Eugene and the Emperor were left sitting in their chairs as they looked across at each other. "This is..." Eugene muttered as he narrowed his eyes and turned to look at their surroundings. This situation seemed familiar. Just now, Eugene had been sitting in a room, but then without any indication, something had happened to change that. "This is a conversation between our minds," the Emperor explained with a chuckle as he remained sitting on his throne. "Don't be too alarmed. Because your body and ours are still sitting in the room exactly as they were. From what we have been informed, you are also an exceptional wizard, correct? So it should be easy for you to understand. All of this is due to an ancient and mysterious piece of magic." "Humph," Eugene grunted. What had happened just now in this space, it all reminded Eugene of the darkroom in the basement of the Lionheart estate. What had happened in the darkroom held similarities to the current situation. Without any signs before Eugene could even tell what would happen, their minds had been stripped from their bodies and materialized within this alternate space. "This is a gift that Vermouth Lionheart, ancestor of the Lionheart clan, gave to the imperial family of Kiel," the Emperor explained with a leisurely smile as he waved his staff. At this gesture, an extravagant wine glass appeared in front of the Emperor's eyes. Even though there was quite some distance between them, the scent wafting from the wineglass was strong enough that it managed to reach Eugene's nose. "As the Emperor, even in reality, we are quite powerful and able to do whatever we so wish. However, in this room, we are omnipotent in the truest sense of the word," the Emperor boasted. This wasn't the real world but instead a world of the mind. Here the Emperor could create whatever he wished. However, this omnipotence belonged solely to the Emperor, not to Eugene. Eugene had also tried to bring forth several things from his imagination as a test, but unlike the Emperor, he wasn't able to create anything. "You should understand what that means," the Emperor said as he moistened his lips with the fragrant wine and rose up from his throne. "In this room, no, in this world we far surpass you. And just like in reality, there is a vast gap between you and ourself. For the past 300 years, this room had faithfully served the needs of the emperors of the Kiel Empire. It was a joy to use when it came to things like satisfying their base desires. But the true value of this room wasn't to yourself but in how it allowed its user to understand others. For example, when the time came to decide who would inherit the throne, the reigning emperor would summon his heirs to this room to complete one final test. Who would be the one who could truly best lead the empire? What desires and ambitions did they harbor in the depths of their hearts? For the past 300 years, the emperors of the Kiel Empire had all been chosen through this test. There were also several other uses apart from that, such as when they wished to confirm whether a servant's loyalty was truly genuine or to find out someone's true intentions. And also, no matter how exceptional of a warrior or a wizard you might be, even if you are the hero chosen by the Holy Sword, that holds no meaning in this world. With just the slightest desire, we are able to shatter your mind. When they needed to eliminate their enemies. Do you feel that our behavior is too vicious? The emperor asked as he began walking over while swirling his wine glass. I was already aware that your majesty dislikes the lion hearts, Eugene calmly replied. The emperor laughed. That's not the case at all. If I really disliked your clan, I would have already taken care of the Lionheart Patriarch by using this room. It's not just us either. All the previous emperors may indeed have always kept a wary eye on the lion hearts and coveted your power. The emperor's footsteps halted. But that is all we have done, claimed the emperor. We might be wary and envious of your clan, but we have never tried to forcefully seize your treasures for ourselves. Out of respect for the great Vermouth who saved this world. And also because of how the Lionhearts have always been loyal to the emperor. So we have never felt the need to get rid of your clan, nor have we tried to forcefully lay our hands on your power. The emperor brought the wine glass to his lips once more. Ha, the emperor sighed. However, now the Lionhearts have grown far too large. Having grown so much, I can't help but feel that they need to be leashed. Eugene held his tongue. The emperor shrugged. Well, in regards to that, we shall slowly consider the issue once our conversation with you is over. Did you call me here to put a leash on the Lionheart clan? Eugene asked suspiciously. Not at all, the emperor replied in a forceful voice. Eugene Lionheart. Allow me to say this much. All this is not because of our own personal desires. More so, it's not even because of any personal feelings towards you. It is all because we wish to preserve the prosperity of the empire and the peace of the continent that we have summoned you here. Huh? Is that so? Eugene said doubtfully. If all you want is the prosperity of the empire and the peace of the continent, why do you have to suppress me? The emperor snorted. Are you really asking because you don't know the answer? It is because you are an existence that endangers the empire's prosperity and the peace of the continent. Crack. The wine glass that the emperor was holding shattered in his hand. Being chosen by the holy sword and thus the god of light? That means you must be the hero. How glorious a fate. Vermouth Lionheart truly was a great warrior. However, do we really need such warriors and heroes in this era? The emperor asked as his shining eyes turned towards Eugene. Eugene Lionheart. During the night march in Lehane, we also heard the conversation that you had with the Demon King of Incarceration. And then we also saw how you offended Gavid Lindman, the Blade of Incarceration. Stop that madman. When Eugene had attacked Gavid back then, the emperor had forgotten his composure and had shouted those words. The Demon King of Incarceration spoke about it, didn't he? About the end of the oath and the war that might follow. The Demon King, as the ruler of Helmuth, showed that he had no intention of starting a war first. However, if we were to provoke a war, there is no chance they would ever back down from one. Come to Pandemonium. Climb up through the Demon King's castle, Babel, and aim your sword at me. If that is what you desire, I shall be excitedly waiting there for you. Who on earth would even want a war? The emperor asked rhetorically, no longer smiling. With his eyes wide, he glared at Eugene and said, If there is no hero, then there will be no war. That is how it has been for the past 300 years. I never even said that I wanted to be the hero, Eugene muttered in confusion, but the emperor was no longer listening to his words. In a passionate voice, the emperor continued shouting, As long as you do not draw your sword against the Demon King, then the war will not break out. However, it seems that you haven't even considered that, have you? You not only declared your challenge to the Demon King but also to the Duke of Helmuth, Gavid Lindman. Just what are you so worried about? Eugene asked with a laugh as he crossed his legs disrespectfully. It seems that your majesty is still unaware. But have you heard of what happened to Helmuth's Dragon Demon Castle? I'm the one who brought it to the ground. As for the Duke? I've also slain that bastard Raizakia. Why don't you come to visit the Lionheart estate sometime? Allow me to show you the lifeless corpse of Raizakia. What did you just say? The emperor gasped as his eyes widened even further. As his shoulders trembled in fear, he stared at Eugene and said, It was you who felled the Dragon Demon Castle? And the demonic dragon Raizakia, who has been in seclusion for hundreds of years. You claim to have killed him. If you're curious, why don't you try me? Eugene challenged. This situation seemed to be completely unfavorable for Eugene. But was that really the case? Eugene at least didn't believe so. It was true that this space and the magic used to create it granted the emperor a form of omnipotence. But Vermouth is the one who created this room. So Eugene was left without any doubt that the emperor wouldn't be able to subdue Eugene within this room. Unlike what the emperor had so confidently declared, it would be impossible for him to crush Eugene's mind. Eugene no Hamel trusted Vermouth. You are challenging me? The emperor's face contorted in a scowl as he raised his staff. The space began to shake. The emperor roared, You You are not permitted to tell any form of a lie in front of us. From now on, everything about you, all of your thoughts, the very foundation of your being shall be revealed to us. I said, try me already, Eugene just sighed. The emperor growled, impudence. His staff waved at Eugene. First of all, get down on your knees. The emperor trailed off as a connection was made and thoughts began to flow from Eugene to the emperor. It wasn't a complete picture, but the emperor was left with a vague understanding of who Eugene truly was. Unable to finish uttering his previous order, the emperor stood there frozen for a few moments. What? The emperor eventually muttered, completely unable to understand what he had just seen. The stupid Hamel? Eugene let out a deep sigh as he leaped up from his seat and said, that's right, you son of a bitch. Chapter 329. The Emperor, 2. Why do people curse? Was there really a need to look for an answer to that question? Cursing was just something that you did. Sometimes curses really did seem to come out all by themselves. Because you wanted to curse. Because you had no choice but to curse. That was currently the case with Eugene. In this situation, faced with such an emperor, the curse words just came pouring out. He had been left with no choice but to curse. Just look at this bastard, no, this son of a bitch. The words the emperor had just spat out painted quite an interesting picture. What did he say? For the empire's prosperity and the peace of the continent? In the end, this son of a bitch was just scared of Helmuth and the Demon Kings. He wanted to stop a war from happening no matter what, so he had called Eugene here today to put a leash on him. In fact, if you looked at it from a different point of view, the emperor's words did seem reasonable. Helmuth was an extremely large empire, and not only was there the threat of the Demon King of incarceration, there was even the Demon King of destruction standing behind him. If all of the nations on the continent, both of the humans and all other races, were to join forces, they might barely be able to stand their ground in a war against Helmuth. No, if the two Demon Kings were to make a personal appearance on the front lines, the war would probably end up one-sidedly flowing in their favor. However, Strahd could only say those kinds of words because he was an emperor who lived in a peaceful era. Only in that way could he actually have such naive thoughts. However, Eugene wasn't someone from this era. Eugene could admit that his way of thinking was still tied back to his past from 300 years ago during the era of war. Regardless of what others might think of him, Eugene really was an old fogey. Let me tell you how things were back in my day, you son of a bitch, Eugene cursed as he sent his chair spinning with a kick. The world was a very fucked up place. Demon folk, demonic beasts, and black wizards were getting up to all sorts of shit all over the place. Meanwhile, all the Demon King's armies were crawling down from the Devildom. The emperor was left grasping for words. Wah. You asked me who on earth would want a war, didn't you? Eugene snorted. Do you really think that back then we all wanted the war to break out? How do you? Those sons of bitches, the Demon Kings, were the ones who first assaulted the rest of the world. As a fucking emperor, haven't you even learned your history, you bastard? Unable to come up with anything to say in his defense, the emperor was still flapping his lips soundlessly. This couldn't be helped. Strahd had been a member of the royal family from the moment he was born. And that too, he was born as the crown prince, first in line for the succession. Because he had such an identity, he had hardly ever heard any rude words throughout his entire life. And in the same way, he was someone who had never once lowered himself to using foul language, nor had he ever felt the need to. But what about Hamel? Growing up in a rural village in the boonies, he had become familiar with swear words from a young age. Having been the leader of their village's gang of kids from a very young age, he had practically lived with swear words stuck to his lips. Then, after becoming a mercenary, every other word out of his mouth was practically a curse. 1. After becoming comrades with Vermouth, Anise had worked on correcting his manners even when it required kicking him in the ass to do so. But people by nature aren't so easy to change. The only effect of Anise's efforts was that he cursed somewhat less than before. Even now, after dying as Hamel and reincarnating as Eugene, he was still just as accustomed to cursing as ever. Eugene continued speaking. After having received such an assault, the people of that era were forced to gather their strengths together to fight back. As for this current peace, this is also something that was only obtained because the people of the past shed their blood in your stead. Got that? Not only were you able to grow up in such a fortunate world where you can live with a full stomach and a roof over your head, but a bastard like you was also even lucky enough to be born into the imperial family and become the emperor. Ha, really, you son of a bitch? Eugene's face twisted into a scowl, and he raised his fist threateningly at the emperor. However, the emperor didn't show much of a reaction to the gesture. This was also a natural reaction for him, because the emperor had never once been on the receiving end of a beating in his entire life. He simply didn't recognize that a fist that had been raised like that could ever be thrown at him. Eugene didn't really care about the fact that the emperor wasn't showing a response. Having been pissed off and annoyed by the emperor, his first reaction was just to pour out everything he wanted to say. "What was that you said earlier?" Eugene asked with a sneer. "The prosperity of the empire and the peace of the continent? You goat fucking fuckwit, what exactly did you hear when that bastard incarceration was throwing his weight around and yapping away? Whether or not a hero appears, and even if we don't do anything, that motherfucking mysterious oath is still going to end. And what do you think will happen once that oath is over? What else? That bastard incarceration will just do the same thing he did 300 years ago. And do you know what that means?" There was no response from the emperor to Eugene's question. "It means the world will be fucked." Eugene roared. "Well, I said the world will be fucked, you idiot. You bastard who only knows how to spout. You dare. You dare. Even knowing just how painfully your ancestors got their shit kicked in 300 years ago, you still have the nerve to say such things." The emperor still couldn't come up with a response to all this. It wasn't that he couldn't come up with a way to refute Eugene's words. It was just that the emperor found himself unable to fully comprehend the situation he was in. The man who was vomiting out such a vulgar and uncultured speech right in front of him was Eugene Lionheart. There was no doubt about that. However, due to the powers given to him by this space, the emperor had discovered that the one inside Eugene Lionheart was the stupid Hamel. But did that even make any sense? What was the stupid Hamel who died 300 years ago doing inside Eugene Lionheart? And was that stupid Hamel from 300 years back actually admonishing the emperor of the Kiel Empire with such harsh curse words? How the hell was he just supposed to accept this? Eugene broke the silence. "You shithead, when an elder born 300 years earlier than you is speaking to you, how dare you keep your mouth shut? Aren't you going to say anything?" The emperor eventually stammered, "I'm impudence." Eugene frowned. "Impudence? You're the one being impudent, you fuck trumpet." Until now, Eugene had been holding himself back from taking action by using curse words instead. But since the emperor was still behaving like this, he felt that cursing alone wasn't enough. If this was still in reality, Eugene would have made an effort to be even the slightest bit more patient. But now that they were here in the special space, he didn't have any intention of keeping his patience. Eugene stalked over to the emperor with a grim expression on his face. Even the emperor couldn't afford to stay still at this move. He still couldn't quite grasp this situation, but even a neighborhood stray, let alone an emperor, would be able to tell that someone drawing closer to them with that expression on their face wouldn't have any kind intentions for them upon arrival. "You dare!" the emperor roared as he waved his staff. Fwoosh! Because his omnipotence within this space was still intact, the emperor was able to fly high into the sky out of his own free will. He created a new throne from this higher vantage point and sat down on it while glaring at Eugene. Mustering his dignity, the emperor shouted, "You dare to question us, the emperor of the Kiel Empire? Aren't you going to get down from there?" Eugene chided like an adult speaking to a particularly naughty child. The emperor stammered, "Tell us your true identity." Eugene snorted, "Tell you what? Haven't you already discovered it due to your oh-so-impressive powers? You already know who I am." "It's..." the emperor trailed off uncertainly. "Fine, since you want me to say it, I'll just say it. I am Eugene Lionheart, the reincarnation of Hamel Dynas, who died 300 years ago. Satisfied? But not even the emperor of my era dared to behave as arrogantly as you have, you motherfucker." Eugene swore loudly. That was a lie. 300 years ago he did meet the emperor, but that was before they had even started exploring the Devildom in earnest. After their party crossed the sea and made a name for themselves while wandering through the Devildom for some time, they declared that their goal was to slay the demon kings and had returned to the continent for resupply and reorganization. The hero Vermouth and his companions had been invited to an audience with the rulers of the continent, which had included the then Emperor of Kiel. In a world that was falling to pieces, the banquet could only have been held by squeezing the lifeblood out of the already suffering people. All to send a farewell to the warriors who would be setting out to slay the demon kings and the hero who stood at their head. Even back then Eugene had disliked how those rulers had held themselves, but that being said he had still been able to hold himself back from pointing an accusing finger at the emperors and cursing them out. But what if? What if Hamel had returned from the castle of the Demon King of incarceration without dying? Would the emperor of that era have still been as arrogant as the emperor of today's era? Eugene didn't think that would have been the case. So even if what he had just said was untrue, Eugene didn't think of it as a lie. "We are the Emperor of Kiel," the emperor declared as he gathered his faculties and settled his trembling voice. Reincarnation? Could such a thing really exist in this world? The emperor still couldn't quite believe it, but he had no choice but to believe it. "Eugene Lionheart," the emperor took a breath. "Even if you are the reincarnation of the stupid Hamel, the hero from 300 years ago, how dare you be so rude in front of us?" Eugene cut him off short. "Why shouldn't I?" Still standing in the same spot, Eugene looked up at the emperor, who was so high that even if Eugene tilted his head all the way back, he could only see the soles of the emperor's feet. As a test, Eugene tried to move his body around. He found himself able to move easily without any problems. Next he tried taking a few light hops on the spot. "Just think about it," Eugene continued. "The reason you called me here was to either subjugate or get rid of me by using the impressive powers of this space." The emperor hesitated. "That's..." Eugene raised an eyebrow. "Are you going to try and deny it? Is it all right for an emperor like you to lie about such a thing? This truly is all for the prosperity of the empire and the peace of the continent," the emperor roared, refusing to back down. "Eugene Lionheart, if you really are the stupid Hamel from back then, shouldn't you be able to understand our will all the more? After all, didn't you personally see and experience that terrible war from 300 years ago?" "Of course I know all about it," Eugene admitted. "Our current peace was won back then by Vermouth Lionheart and the other heroes like you," the emperor attempted to claim, "but we, as the reigning emperor, have the duty to maintain this peace." "It seems you weren't fucking listening to what I just said, were you, you moron? Even if we don't do anything, the oath is still going to end." Eugene repeated himself. "Even so, there should still be other methods," the emperor desperately insisted. "And the oath still hasn't ended just yet. Also, even if the oath does end, it's not guaranteed that the Demon Kings will declare a war." Eugene snapped back. "And there's no guarantee they won't. Hey, do you really think you know the Demon Kings better than I do? When you don't even know better than me, why do you keep trying to get the last word?" The emperor shook his head. "There might still be other methods. A way to maintain peace without a war or killing the Demon Kings." Cracker crack. Gripping the armrests of his throne so strongly that the wood was starting to shatter, the emperor declared, "That is the reason we summoned you. Because we believed that it was necessary to prevent you from acting in haste. To understand your true intentions and determine whether you are a threat to the empire and the world." "So what are you going to do now?" Eugene asked with a smirk as he tilted his head to the side. "You've already tried it, haven't you? The power that you've been granted inside this space can't do anything to threaten me." "Do not underestimate our power," the emperor warned. Eugene sneered. "I might just roll over laughing. If anyone were to see you now, they might think that you were the one who created the powers of this place. But Vermouth was the one who gave this to you, didn't he?" Without saying anything in response, the emperor suddenly raised his staff. Boom. The space began to vibrate once more. A colossal sword abruptly appeared high in the skies above where the emperor was sitting. "Eugene Lionheart, no," the emperor corrected himself. "The stupid Hamel, your very existence poses a great threat to the empire and the world. As such, we shall administer your sentence here and now." Eugene snorted. "Let's just say that you do whatever you're thinking of, you dumbass. What are you going to do about Sienna, who you didn't call here today?" The emperor faltered. "That's..." Eugene prompted. "You should know by now I'm actually not just Sienna's heir. So what do you think will happen if I don't return from the imperial palace? Sienna will naturally come looking for me, no?" The emperor's eyes began to waver. Like Eugene had just said, even if it was possible to somehow subdue or kill Eugene, the existence of the wise Sienna still remained a huge threat. If they were able to bring her into this room, there might be some way of dealing with her, but would it even be possible to hold a conversation with an archwizard who was in a full rage because her heir, no, her old friend, had run into some kind of problem in the palace? However, that being said, the emperor still couldn't back down from his position. Eugene Lionheart was dangerous. Just from the fact that he was the hero, he endangered their current peace. But the knowledge that his true identity was that of an old ghost from 300 years in the past made him even more of a threat. The Emperor had to somehow get a leash on him here and now. "Do you really think you are doing the right thing here?" Eugene asked with a snort. "Sienna is alive and so is Molin. There's me as well. The continent is in much better shape than it was 300 years ago. The Demon King of Incarceration and the demon folk may also have gotten that much stronger, but we're still not at such a huge disadvantage as we were 300 years ago." The Emperor silently considered this. "You said that I, as the hero, am a threat to the world, but is that really the case?" Eugene asked skeptically. "Instead, isn't my existence an insurance policy put in place in case the world really is about to get fucked up?" Emperor Strahd II wasn't an idiot. He might have his own greed and reservations against the Lionheart clan, but even he realized there was cause to rethink his previous course of action. Should he really kill Eugene Lionheart, the hero? It wasn't like he hadn't given any previous thought to making such a choice. However, like Eugene had just said, the Emperor felt that the existence of the hero might actually be needed. It was just that currently, in this period when the oath had yet to run its course, the Emperor had believed that it was necessary to maintain the peace by restraining the young hero from running amok due to his hot-bloodedness and getting into conflicts with Helmuth and the Demon Kings. After all, wasn't there already a precedent for doing so? If Eugene hadn't raised his middle finger to the Demon King of Incarceration during the night march, or if he hadn't decided to attack the Blade of Incarceration when the latter was attempting to withdraw, then the Emperor wouldn't have felt the need to use such an extreme method to put Eugene in his place. "I still find you extremely dangerous," the Emperor eventually said with a long sigh as he waved his staff. At this gesture, the sword floating in the sky disappeared without a trace. "When you've already gone so far as to fell the Dragon Demon Castle, and you've even slain Raizakia, one of the Dukes of Helmuth, haven't you? If these facts were to be revealed, they would undoubtedly cause a controversy. Since it's a secret that I'm the one who brought down the Dragon Demon Castle, everything will be just fine," Eugene assured him. The Emperor hissed, "You've slain Duke Raizakia, so do you really think that your responsibility for the fall of the Dragon Demon Castle will remain a secret?" Eugene waved off his concern. "Hey, I said that it will be fine. All of the demon folk in Helmuth would have already known that Raizakia wasn't in the Dragon Demon Castle at the time. And the Demon King of Incarceration won't even care that Raizakia is dead. How can you be so sure of that? Do you really think you have a better idea than I do of what that bastard Incarceration might be thinking?" When Eugene put it like that, the Emperor had no choice but to keep his mouth shut. To be honest, Eugene wasn't really all that confident in this regard. Eugene had never actually faced the Demon King of Incarceration himself, 300 years ago, and even though they had met several times since he was reincarnated, he still couldn't even begin to guess what kind of thoughts might be running through the head of the Demon King of Incarceration. Eugene thought of something. "And also, you might think that the world right now is extremely peaceful, so you say that you have a duty to protect the peace, but that's not actually true though." "What do you mean by that?" the Emperor asked suspiciously. Eugene told the Emperor of what had almost occurred in the Samar rainforest. He told how Edmund Kodrith, one of the 3 mages of incarceration, had performed a ritual deep within the rainforest and had almost become a demon king by sacrificing tens of thousands of the native tribal people. The Emperor gasped, "That's just absurd. Why would I lie?" Eugene defended himself. "If you don't believe me, you can check it yourself using your powers, no?" But wouldn't the Emperor have already done so if he could? Although he was brimming with the desire to confirm the truth for himself, his powers weren't working as he wanted them to. Just like in the earlier case, the Emperor had attempted to investigate every last detail about Eugene, but all he had been able to find out with the powers of this space was that Eugene was also the stupid Hamel. As expected, it seems like they're not working properly, Eugene thought as he confirmed his suspicions through the Emperor's reaction. Vermouth, who had created this space, must have arranged it so that the powers of this place wouldn't be able to pose a threat to Hamel. Since the Lionheart line must also have continued to exist for the sake of Hamel's reincarnation, such arrangements should not only apply to Eugene but also to those of the Lionheart blood as well. Eugene tried to convince the Emperor once more. "Also, it's not like I'm going to start a war right away or go off to fight the Demon King." The Emperor eyed him skeptically. "I've already been reincarnated after dying once 300 years ago," Eugene reminded him. Do you really think I'm crazy enough to put myself in a position where I would definitely die once more? I've also made some plans after thinking everything through. The Emperor considered this. Think about it rationally, Emperor Strahd II. What reason do we have to go against each other? Naturally, I also want this world to be peaceful. After all, I even fought and died for that peace 300 years ago, Eugene said persuasively as he motioned for the Emperor to descend. It's hard to keep looking up at you like this. Why don't you come down a little closer so we can have an in-depth conversation? That's right, let's try and have that truthful conversation that you were aiming for. Eugene's words were delivered in a soothing tone. His attitude might be disrespectful and his tone was extremely arrogant, but the Emperor decided to try and understand him with a heart as open as the sea. After all, he agreed with Eugene's words. World peace, just how wonderful did those two words sound? All right, the Emperor agreed with a nod as he waved his staff once more. His throne, which was floating high in the sky, slowly began to descend. The Emperor declared, "Hero from the past, allow us to introduce ourselves once more. We are the 48th Emperor of the Kiel Empire, Strahd Theodore Kiel. 0. Come here, you son of a bitch," Eugene suddenly snarled, showing no intention of listening to the end of the Emperor's introduction. The moment the throne had come within reach, Eugene's hands had shot out and grabbed the legs of the throne. "You ill-mannered bastard," Eugene cursed. "You keep acting so haughty just because you're the Emperor, but I'm 300 years older than a fucking brat like you. What are you doing?" The Emperor yelped as his arms waved around in shock. He attempted to throw off Eugene and raise the throne back up, but it didn't work as he wanted. Instead, the throne fell to the ground due to the force of Eugene's pull. "You're asking me what I'm doing? You should know, this is all for your sake," Eugene said. The Emperor panicked. "What are you talking about? You're so arrogant and mannerless because you've never once received a proper beating since you were born. But this is just fine. It's not like you'll get hurt in real life just because you receive a beating in here." Now then, Eugene's eyes widened in excitement as he pulled the Emperor up by his collar. "I'm just going to have to hit you a few times." A sudden swing of Eugene's palm slammed into the Emperor's cheek. 1. The original Korean text describes him as living with a rag in his mouth. Koreans use the idiom of having a rag in their mouth to describe someone who swears a lot, similar to how English would describe such a person as foul-mouthed. Chapter 330. The Emperor 3. Meanwhile, back in the room, everything was silent. Alcester was familiar with this sort of situation and the accompanying silence. Alcester had been the knight in charge of escorting the Emperor when the latter was still just the crown prince, and from there, they had grown out of the master-servant relationship into regarding each other as friends. So Alcester was well acquainted with this room and could understand why the Emperor had summoned Eugene Lionheart here. However, that didn't mean he could just accept it. Just because the Emperor was his friend and the lord he had sworn to serve didn't mean Alcester could accept his decisions unconditionally. Alcester knew the purpose of this room. It was here that generation after generation of Kiel's emperors had been able to separate their friends from their foes, gain a complete understanding of their allies, and deliver a unilateral judgment onto their enemies. "I really don't like this," Alcester muttered to himself in a low voice. This wasn't something that a royal knight who was meant to be absolutely loyal to the Emperor should say, but Alcester just couldn't feel comfortable with this situation. "What exactly about this is causing you such a disturbance?" one of the Dark brothers asked, neither having put away their swords. Their swords, which they had drawn together in unison, were crossed over each other and had stopped just short of slicing Alcester's throat. Their sharp blades touched his bare skin, but Alcester didn't pay their swords any attention. He was still glaring down at the hand he had placed on the Emperor's shoulder. "Please withdraw your hand, Lord Alcester," Carrion requested. "No matter how close you may be to His Majesty, your current behavior is extremely disrespectful to your liege," Derry scolded. Biting down hard on his lips, Alcester withdrew his hand. Once he had done so, the Dark brothers also placed their swords into their sheaths. While still remaining wary of Alcester, the two slowly retreated backward to stand on either side of Eugene. Alcester's brow furrowed as he glared at the Dark brothers. "The Emperor didn't tell me anything about this matter or anything that is going on here," Alcester complained. "You should already know the reason for that, Commander," said Carrion. "This Eugene Lionheart, It seems that the commander truly regards this cheeky brat fondly? Alcester raised an eyebrow. You're saying I regard him fondly? Would it be better to say that you favor him? Derry returned the question with a smirk. Snorting at the Dark brothers' words, Alcester shook his head and said, I can't just let your words go like this. Lord Carrion, Lord Derry, whether it's regarding him fondly or favoring him, don't those words make it sound like I'm a superior looking down on Sir Eugene from a higher position? As he said this, Alcester turned to stare at Eugene. The Emperor and Eugene's eyes were shut tightly as if they were in a deep sleep. Their minds were most likely elsewhere, having a conversation in a space separate from this one, within the world of their consciousness. Alcester continued, I don't think of myself as such an amazing person. The fact that I'm older than Sir Eugene? What's so important about that? There are many other things that a knight should value more than that. Whether it's their honor, skill, courage, or conviction. If you had to count them out one by one, you would find countless other things more important than one's age. The Dark brothers remained silent. What I'm trying to say is, in terms of the countless qualities that a knight should have, I don't think that there are any in which I greatly surpass Sir Eugene. Instead, there are many things that I feel I am lacking in compared to him. That's why I can't say that I regard him fondly or favor him. Alcester paused as he glanced down at Eugene's sword. In my eyes, Sir Eugene is someone I respect as a fellow knight. He's someone I wish to compete with, someone I want to match in terms of skill, and also someone I hold in awe. Carrion frowned. Please don't say such careless things, Lord Alcester Dragonic. You are the commander of the White Dragon Knights, the sword of His Majesty and the Empire's strongest knight. Yes, you're right. I am the commander of the White Dragon Knights. His Majesty's sword. However, the strongest knight in the Empire? Strangely enough, a lot of people do call me that. But allow me to say that I, at least, have never thought of myself in that way at all. Alcester admitted as he shook his head with a chuckle. If you were to ask me right now to name the knights in this empire who I feel are better than me, I can recite several names without hesitation. If you expand that range to the entire continent, the number grows so much that they can't be counted with all the fingers on your hands. Also, in a nutshell, Eugene Lionheart, this young man, should be counted among that number. Derry burst out in reprimand. Lord Alcester. Alcester chided him sarcastically. Lower your voice. What are you going to do if it causes His Majesty to open his eyes? Carrion warned him once more. Please be careful of your words and actions, Lord Alcester. Didn't you say earlier that you don't like this? That might be taken as you doubting His Majesty's choice of actions. Of course I'm doubting him, Alcester responded without hesitation. He glared at the Dark brothers as they stood on either side of the slumbering Eugene and continued speaking. If I had known about this beforehand, I would have remonstrated with His Majesty even if it meant losing my head. You two should also be aware of the purpose of this room's existence. I don't really feel any desire to know what you might be thinking of that has caused you so much hesitation, my lord, Carrion said dismissively. However, Lord Alcester, His Majesty did not summon Eugene Lionheart here to suppress him. It was just for the sake of having a sincere conversation. A conversation? Alcester laughed sarcastically. Can you really say that when you know full well the abilities of this room? What's going on in this room right now most likely isn't just a conversation. And of course, it won't be a recruitment attempt either. Alcester clenched his fists tightly before continuing to speak. I wasn't informed what was going to happen today, but you two obviously knew, Alcester accused. Why didn't you say anything to persuade His Majesty otherwise? If there truly was a need for a sincere conversation, they didn't need to come to this room for it. Alcester might not have personally heard from His Majesty about why he had summoned Eugene to this room, but it should be because His Majesty had judged that Eugene, as the hero, was a threat to the Empire. If that was the case, then what had the Emperor decided to do to Eugene? Was he going to eliminate Eugene or just subdue him? Right now, those were the only two options that the Emperor could choose from. However, things of that nature shouldn't be done to Eugene Lionheart. He had not only received the acknowledgement of the Holy Sword, he had even been personally recognized as the hero by the Demon King himself. At this moment, the end of the oath that had lasted for 300 years was approaching. But to think that the hero who, like the Great Vermouth, would personally lead the way into a new era through his firm will and actions was actually being persecuted by the Emperor instead of receiving his support? Although for now, Alcester didn't know how their conversation might end, He already felt disillusioned by the Emperor's decision. Carrion frowned. You say that we shouldn't have come to this room. Your words make it seem like you doubt His Majesty's purpose, my lord. If I say I do, would you report it to His Majesty? Alcester challenged. Of course I would, Carrion readily admitted. Haha. If that's the case, then it seems that I too will have to have a sincere conversation with the Emperor. Alcester let out a snort of laughter and shook his head. If the Emperor really did so, Alcester would accept the invitation to their conversation without any resistance. There was no further communication between the knights. The Daharks remained wary that Alcester might attempt to disturb the Emperor's body, but Alcester simply stood quietly behind the Emperor without taking any other actions. The thing that eventually broke the following silence was a low groan. Oh. All three knights flinched and turned to look at the source of the noise. It was Eugene Lionheart. His bowed head was raised up and his shuttered eyes opened. The next moment, Eugene immediately came to his senses and stood up. Unlike Eugene, who had already gathered his faculties, the Emperor's eyes were still shut. Instead of waking, the Emperor's shoulders were trembling like he was going through a seizure. Your Majesty? Standing right behind the Emperor, Alcester panicked and grabbed the Emperor's shoulders. However, the Emperor's shaking wouldn't stop. There is blood. Derry let out a cry. With his head still drooping low, blood was dripping down the Emperor's face due to a nosebleed. Alcester's face paled. He quickly stepped in front of the Emperor and checked for a pulse while observing his complexion. Fortunately, there were no further problems with the Emperor's pulse and breathing. The only symptom was the nosebleed. But what on earth had happened? This was the first time such a thing had ever occurred. The Dahark brothers roared loudly as their faces twisted into a grimace. You knave. You, how dare you harm His Majesty? Drawing their swords at the same time, they slashed at Eugene. He had just returned to his senses, but Eugene's head was perfectly clear. With swords coming at him from both sides, Eugene just reached out with both hands instead of panicking. Whoosh. The flames of the white flame formula were instantly drawn upon to engulf both of Eugene's hands. Why don't you two calm down? Eugene suggested. The Dahark brothers' swords weren't able to move an inch. Although the brothers had drawn and slashed their swords in a hurry, there should have been more than enough force behind their blows. But the pair's swords couldn't even leave a small mark on the palms that had blocked their attacks, let alone keep pushing. No, in fact, they hadn't even been able to touch him. The purple flames covering Eugene's palms were overpowering the Dahark brothers' sword force in terms of momentum and were instead pushing the swords backward. What did you do to His Majesty? Carrion and Derry shouted accusingly as they leaped backward, bringing their sword force to full power. Even though they had just asked Eugene a question, the two swung their swords down on him once more without waiting for his response. Their attacks weren't meant to just subdue him. Their swords were practically dripping with their intent to murder Eugene. Their rage was understandable as their Emperor had been put into such a worrying state. But that said, Eugene wasn't just going to calmly allow them to keep slashing at him. No, like I said, calm down already, Eugene huffed. But it didn't seem like they would listen to his words. It can't be helped, Eugene decided. The moment the Dahark brothers' swords were about to hit, Eugene suddenly disappeared. The two fierce blades of sword force sliced through the now empty space. Instead of being shocked that Eugene had somehow managed to dodge them, the two brothers were more shaken by the fact that they hadn't even been able to catch the slightest glimpse of Eugene's movements. But before they could get over their shock, it was replaced with agony. Gag. Derry let out a choked gasp as he buckled over. A fist was buried deep in his liver. At some point, Eugene suddenly appeared right at Derry's side. Eugene had struck Derry with a measured amount of force, but he didn't feel like his anger was soothed in the slightest. The memory of how this son of the bitch, Derry Dark, had been forcefully glaring at him earlier ran through his mind. That said, it would be too cruel of him to actually pluck out Derry's eyes, so Eugene decided to compromise. Bam! Derry's head jerked backward. Eugene's fist had struck Derry in the left eye with a short jab. Eye! Derry screamed as his hands rose to cover his face. Thanks to Eugene's exquisite control over his strength, Derry's eyeball hadn't burst, but it hurt so much that it felt like his eye socket had been set on fire, making it difficult to see. Crack! A whip-like swing of Eugene's leg shattered Derry's left shin. Derry fell to the floor with another scream. At this sight, The older brother Carrion let out a roar and rushed at Eugene, only for Eugene to give him fair treatment. Since the younger brother was struck in his left eye and shin, the older brother was struck in the right eye and shin. "I told you two to calm down," Eugene said with a click of his tongue as he looked down on the brothers, who had collapsed to the floor unconscious. Then Eugene straightened his expression and turned to face the last person standing in front of him, Alcester Dragonic. Alcester was still examining the Emperor. Even though the Dark brothers were being beaten right behind his back without even being able to lay a hand on their attacker, Alcester hadn't paid them any attention. "Shouldn't you be taking His Majesty to a safe place?" asked Eugene. "It seems like there aren't any major problems with his condition," Alcester said after a long sigh as he straightened up. "I am not a healer, but I know enough to tell that His Majesty's current condition isn't bad enough that he requires hospitalization." Eugene hesitated. "But what if?" "It seems you're worried about him," Alcester commented as he turned his head to look at Eugene. "If I had taken His Majesty to a safe place immediately, would the Dark brothers who were left here be able to arrest you?" Eugene just shrugged without a response. This was because the answer to that question was already laid out in front of Alcester's eyes. "That's right," Alcester nodded. "Those two are exceptional knights, but they still can't match up to you. Seeing them from your point of view, the Dark brothers and the rest of the captains in the White Dragon Knights must seem like children." "It's just because they were hasty," Eugene explained. "No matter what, the results have already been settled," Alcester said with a shrug. "If I leave here with His Majesty, what will you do now? Would you be willing to wait here until I return?" "Of course I am," Eugene nodded. "Just what on earth did you do?" Alcester asked with another sigh. With a depressed expression, Alcester stared at Eugene and said, "No matter what the reason may be, you've woken up, and His Majesty hasn't. He's even lost some blood." Eugene didn't offer any explanation. Alcester stated his concerns aloud. "The moment I leave this room with His Majesty, you will become a traitor who has harmed the Emperor of the Keel Empire. The laws of the Empire cannot be ignored just because you are the hero. Also, this matter won't end with just you alone. It won't end with the main branch of the Lionheart clan either. All of the collateral bloodlines will be charged with treason as well." "That sounds likely," Eugene agreed. "You probably won't agree to be charged with any crimes," Alcester guessed. "The moment I leave this room, no, even if I stay here, you're probably already planning on escaping somehow. Because if you were willing to be treated as a criminal, you wouldn't have knocked the Dark brothers unconscious." "That's right," Eugene nodded. "That's why I'm facing such a dilemma," Alcester complained. Was it really okay for him to say all this right now? Alcester asked himself as he touched the sword at his waist. "To prevent you from escaping, should I be trying to block you, or should I instead be helping you to escape?" Alcester voiced his confusion. "Huh." Eugene's head tilted to the side. "Within this imperial palace, there are a lot of things that are accessible to me. I can temporarily hide His Majesty who has lost consciousness, making it seem like he's been kidnapped. It's possible to buy us some time in that way, then I can help you escape from beneath the countless eyes within the imperial palace," Alcester proposed. Eugene called out to him, "Lord Alcester." Alcester continued without a pause. "Of course, that means I'll probably lose a lot in the process. It won't just be my personal honor that will be tarnished, but also the honor that has been passed down through my family over the past 300 years. No, I might even lose my entire clan. The same goes for you as well. Even if the main family line were to somehow escape the Empire, the Lionheart's countless collateral lines would be left within the hands of the Empire. They will all most likely be executed." The more he spoke, the more desperate and depressed Alcester felt. Letting out another sigh, Alcester continued speaking. "However, that's the only way for you to survive. You need to run away, flee from this empire, and hide in another country while making your preparations." Eugene asked curiously, "What should I be preparing for?" Alcester answered, "Slaying the Demon Kings, of course. After all, that's the sole thing that you as the hero are meant to do." "So you're willing to assist me because of that?" Eugene asked once more. "Rather than turning you in as a traitor and locking you in a cell, this would be the better choice for the whole world." "That's right, so there wasn't really a need to face this dilemma at all," Alcester finally realized as he shook his head with a wry smile. After looking at Alcester with a strange expression, Eugene grinned and sat down in his chair. "What are you doing?" Alcester demanded. I have no intention of running away, Eugene explained. There's no need for me to do so either. As such, you do not need to have been so tortured by this dilemma, Lord Alcester. What on earth? It seems that you don't even know what you're saying. There's no way that something like this will end lightly, Alcester argued. No, it will end without any fuss, Eugene said, staring at the still fainted emperor. Because the emperor is extremely generous after all. So just wait here with me until His Majesty comes to his senses. Alcester asked skeptically, Are you being serious right now? I am, Eugene nodded firmly. While feeling confused, Alcester stared directly into Eugene's eyes. It didn't seem like Eugene was lying or scheming something. For a few moments, Alcester hesitated before nodding his head. After some time had passed, the emperor opened his eyes with a groan. Alcester quickly got down on one knee before the emperor and shouted, Your Majesty. Lord Alcester, said the emperor as he raised his head while gasping for breath. On the other side of the kneeling Alcester, he saw the fainted Dahark brothers, each with a leg grotesquely bent in the wrong direction. And behind those two he saw Eugene sitting in a chair. When the emperor's eyes met with Eugene's, Eugene winked back with a smile. Aya! The emperor cried out as the memories of a terrible banquet of violence flashed through his mind. Push! As memories of such agony that he had never before experienced stimulated the emperor's mind, the nosebleed that had been stopped temporarily began to flow once more. Your Majesty! Alcester cried out in alarm. Are you all right? Eugene also asked in a worried tone. With trembling shoulders, the emperor nodded and stammered, I am fine. Your Majesty, just what on earth happened? Alcester asked while holding on to the emperor's trembling hands comfortingly. Through gritted teeth the emperor declared, Nothing happened. Alcester frowned. Huh? I said nothing happened, the emperor insisted while avoiding Eugene's gaze.